on Google and I asked, which continent is the richest continent in the world? And he said that Africa is the richest continent in the world in terms of natural resources. And I felt so proud to be African. Then I went ahead to search for the poorest continent in the world. And it gave me a fascinating contradiction. It said that Africa is the poorest continent in the world. And I had a jaw drop. Then I ran quickly to everybody's new best friend, ChatGPT, and asked the same question. And I got the same response. And that was a blow to the face. Now think about this. Africa is the richest continent in the world in terms of natural resources, holding over 90% of the world's cobalt, with a single country within it holding over 70% of that cobalt. And if you don't understand how big of a deal this is, please, I advise you to make your research right now. And yet, we are tagged the poorest continent in the world. You know, sometimes I wonder if we as Africans realize that our futures are tied together. You see, Africa is like a piece of marble, rough, unseen for her value and potential, not by outsiders, but by her own people. And for very sad and obvious reasons, still uncertain of her future, when in reality, we are a masterpiece waiting to be revealed. Today, I want to remind you of why we as Africans must unite, discover our own potentials to help reclaim our future. I'll take you back to where this lesson became real for me with my personal story. It was 11 years ago. It was a night time. I was sitting outside the house with my father, with my mother, and my 5 brothers. Of course, we were entertained by the sounds of crickets, no lights. Everybody was talking, and I was so lost in thought, because I could already sense the failure that came from the environment where I grew up from. And as a curious young child, I looked at my father and asked if this is how life is going to be forever, and if I'm going to turn out like everybody else. And I will never forget the smile on my father's face as he said to me, "Maryam, you will be different." Just one sentence, just one word, different. And that word became a seed planted deeply in my heart, a seed that grew into the belief that I could change Africa. And that belief became my why, my purpose, and my burning desire. So at the age of 14, I started my entrepreneurial journey with no roadmap, obviously. What could a 14-year-old do? Had no plans. But one thing I did have was my why I started. And that why translated to the belief that I had that I could discover a disruptive solution that Africa so desperately needs. And that why is something that a lot of us in this room and across Africa do not share, the belief that Africa can rise. But anyway, I failed when I started. As a 14-year-old, I could do very little things. I failed in projects. I failed in competitions. I failed so many times that I lost counts. But then I considered myself an ambassador for failure. And it was in a positive way. Because I realized along the journey that every time I failed, I was failing forward and I was heading somewhere. However, I made a lot of excuses during the process. But the bigger shifts came when I realized that I could no longer keep waiting for permission to start. I remember saying to myself that if I turn out like everybody else, then no one is coming to save us, just like no one is coming to save Africans except for Africans. And so I started my first initiative at the age of 17. And today we are impacting thousands of lives globally, locally, regionally. I work with UN agencies, and I travel the world speaking on stages like this. But when I come back to where I come from, the impact is still very little. And that was when it dawned on me that we must unite as Africans, because I cannot do this alone. I remember during the preparation for this talk, I went online and I wanted to see what other Africans were talking about Africa's future. And then I came across a comment which reads like this: Africa would not rise until young Western-based second-generation entrepreneurs return to develop it. Now let that sink in. Africa would not rise until young Western-based second-generation entrepreneurs return to develop it. When I read these comments, I shook my head because who says that a particular region is responsible for Africa's development? Who says that a particular country, or particular tribe, a particular religion, or a particular gender or age group is responsible for Africa's development? You see, we are still divided by our mindset. There was a lot of arguments on that comment section, and that is the reason why we are where we are today. But I do agree with this person when it comes to entrepreneurship, because I've always known that entrepreneurship and innovation is the future for Africa, and we cannot depend on the government alone to help us reclaim our future. But then I do agree with this person when it comes to entrepreneurship, because look at it. Africans are some of the most entrepreneurial people you come across in the world today. And if you don't believe me, open your WhatsApp contact right now. At least 10 people are selling something, and I advise you to patronize them. But somehow when we talk about progress, the focus shifts entirely on the government when we have that capacity to start from somewhere. You see, we are so backward in the mindset that we don't believe that there's an opportunity, so we fail to start. I remember talking to a friend of mine, and I said to him that I like to travel the world. I love to explore the world. By the end of the day, I want to come back to Nigeria because this is where home feels like. And he goes like this: if Nami Biwe get this opportunity, I don't jabba. And in my mind, I looked at him, I'm like, you know, get money, one jabba, you go suffer. Now, this translates to the belief that he doesn't believe that there's an opportunity for him in Africa, and so he needs to leave the country or the continent for him to attain that opportunity. If only we realize how blessed we are with Africa, but at the same time, how ignorant we are towards the wonderful blessings we've been given with Africa. You see, where there's a problem, the best entrepreneurs thrive where there's a problem, because where there's a problem, there's a market. If money is what you're looking for, where there's a market, there's money. And where there's this innovation by entrepreneurs, there's development, and then there's betterment of life. People like Aliko Dangote are transforming the food industry and so many other industries in Africa, reducing massive reliance on importation. People like Mo Ibrahim are revolutionizing telecommunication. And then people like Tony Elumelu, which everybody knows here, are empowering thousands of entrepreneurs, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. And this goes to prove that Africa's future lies in its innovators, in its entrepreneurs, and not foreign aid. We don't need foreign aid. What we need is investments, and investments in our own people, but it starts with you and from your heart. Now, the real question is, can just 5 people help create the change that we need and help drive the innovation alone? You see, a powerful statement was once made, not by a Nigerian, not by a Kenyan, not by a Moroccan, not by a South African. In fact, not by an African, but a German, Angela Merkel. And she once said that the future of the world will be decided in Africa. And it got me thinking, then what are Africans looking for outside of Africa? Why go in search of an opportunity where you're not wanted? You see, during this process, I realized that the problem we have in Africa is our mindset. And we need to work on that mindset because it's stopping us from taking action. Now, as you see here today, the devices in your pockets, the phones, everybody has a phone, the laptops, even the electric cars disrupting the world, everybody wants a Tesla. They depend almost on a single African country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which holds over 70% of the world's cobalt, which is the key ingredients powering the future, the key ingredients for batteries. But yet, the very people of this community, of this country, suffer to get clean water, walk on dirt roads, and are the poorest country, one of the poorest countries in the world. Now ask yourselves, how is it that a country so rich in resources is one of the poorest countries in the world? You see, it's not just a situation of Congo, it's a situation of so many other African countries. And we are exploited, and we are divided by our mindsets and corruption. Now the question is, what if African entrepreneurs and innovators leverage the opportunity that we have, the resources that we have to reclaim our future? Because if all we ever do is to import foreign products and export our raw materials, we would continue to remain behind. You see, Africa keeps exporting raw materials, importing finished products. It's just like selling cassava for 2 naira and then buying back the gari for $20. And if we continue to do this at this rate, we may end up exporting water and importing bottled rain. Now, I want you to imagine a moment, 10 years, this moment, 10 years from now. Are we going to be depending on someone else to help us reclaim our future? Are we going to be waiting for someone to help us take that action? Are we going to make the excuse that we don't come from privilege? Are we going to make the excuse that we are going to fail? Because failing is definitely part of the journey, and that success you think is a destination is just a journey. Are we going to make the excuse that we don't have the community because I am a proof that you can start from little, from scratch, and get to somewhere? And what we need is to take that action as entrepreneurs, obviously, and innovators, because I love that. But we need to make our collective little efforts, bring it together, and make it a massive victory for Africa. I'm going to leave you with one final quote from my favorite author, Napoleon Hill. And he once said, "A man who wins is the one who thinks he can. And I know that Africa can rise, and that Africa can reclaim her future. But the question is, do you believe?" Thank you.